What are the 11 symptoms that tell you that you have unresolved trauma? I will answer this question for you in this video. My name is Tamara Schenk and I'm a licensed and certified trauma clearing master healer. Before we go into the symptoms, I will quickly define for you what actually is a trauma and also why you cannot talk it away. What are trauma examples? You are aware of those. These are accidents, shocks, crime, any kind of abuse, sexual, emotional, mental abuse, mobbing, bullying, for example, prenatal and birth complications, extreme betrayal, bankruptcy, huge financial losses, the loss of a loved one, it can be a human or an animal, and difficult breakups and challenging divorces are also trauma examples. So what is a trauma defined? So in that traumatic situation, when you experience that, the time seems to stop for you and you probably cannot even breathe for a moment. And in that moment, the trauma creates an energetic potential at the quantum level. And that creates a huge energetic blockage that sits in your body-mind-spirit system at the cellular and DNA level. It's actually a soul fragment of you that holds this traumatic experience inside of it. And these energetic blockages, I call them trauma trigger buttons, they can be pushed in any similar future event. And the more these buttons are pushed later on, the bigger they become, and the bigger is the problem for you, and your fear-based reaction when these buttons are pushed also becomes more extreme every time. And that is what's holding you back in your life, and that is what impacts your life in a negative way in all life areas. So imagine this trauma trigger button sits, as I said, as an energetic blockage at the cellular and DNA level. So you cannot talk away an energetic blockage, right? So that's just not how things are working. These blockages have to be cleared at the quantum level. So trauma is not a mental thing, a mental symptom to cope with. If you learn how to cope with your trauma, you are only treating the symptoms of the trauma, but you don't clear the trauma itself. If you want to clear the trauma itself, your energetic trauma trigger buttons have to be cleared at the quantum level. Now let's get right into it and let's talk about what are the 11 symptoms that tell you that you have unresolved trauma. Symptom number 1, you are procrastinating and you are in a state of avoidance. So at the core of each trauma there is fear. And what does fear do? Fear wants to keep you safe, right? That's why fear wants to keep you exactly where you currently are. And you avoid everything that would take you out of your current state. So you don't work on the next steps in your life, you don't work on your life's mission, you don't change situations in your life, you simply stay where you currently are. That means, and your energy frequency remains the same. And the energy frequency of your trauma that impacts all of this keeps you attracting the same situations, the same people, and the same events repeatedly. So you don't get out of this cycle unless you make a conscious decision that you step out of your comfort zone, out of your fear, and work on clearing your trauma. Symptom number 2, you are afraid of being judged and you are afraid of what others think of you. So trauma also leads to low self-esteem and to a lack of self-love. So that means that it's important that recognition comes from outside of you. It means it has to come from other people. So if this recognition from other people is not happening at all, or if the recognition is not a very positive feedback, it's more a critical feedback, or it's even judgmental, then your trauma buttons are pushed. And the consequence of that is that the reaction you're having is fearful at first and can then turn into anger. Symptom number 3, you suffer from severe fear, anxiety, or depression. So we just talked about that at the core of each trauma there is fear. So every time these trauma triggers get pushed, the underlying fear leads to an extreme fear-based reaction or anxiety. And usually these reactions are more extreme every time the trauma buttons get pushed. So for other people who are observing a situation, your fear or your anxiety might seem irrational given the current situation, but for you it is happening because the situation reminds your system of an already experienced trauma in the past, and this memory is stored in the trauma button that was just pushed. So over time this can turn into depression. Symptom number 4, you tend to emotional outbursts and mood swings. So whenever your trauma trigger buttons are pushed, extreme emotional reactions can be the consequence. So in addition of a fear-based reaction, it can also be very emotional. And as this is the case, especially if you experience a lot of emotional abuse, so then these emotional roller coasters and outbursts and mood swings occur very often. Symptom number 5, you often feel offended by things other people say or do. So first of all, if something that another person says to you or does to you is offending you, then it really has to do with you because your buttons get pushed. So simply what other people say and how they say things and what they do and how they do things, that really has to do with them and with their issues and with their challenges, with their personality. So ideally, if you would not have any buttons from past trauma, it would not affect you in any way. Now, if it does, if you feel offended by something other people say or do, also here your trauma trigger buttons were pushed by what they said and what they did and reactivated. So the memory of past trauma comes up. That was probably emotional or mental abuse, and you feel offended because of that. So if you are cleared from past trauma and there are no trauma trigger buttons that can be pushed, then there is also no way that you would feel offended by other people's words or actions. Symptom number 6, you are unable to form stable and close relationships. So what also comes with trauma is not only fear and a lack of trust, but it is also a lack of self-esteem and a lack of self-love. So with these elements, a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-love, and a lack of trust, it is challenging to form any stable and close relationships. So there is always fear when it comes to trusting another person and to grow a relationship, because the lack of self-esteem and self-love that comes with the trauma that makes it challenging to manage any conflicts in a constructive way, and also the lack of what you feel inside yourself gets projected to the other person, and then there is an underlying expectations that the self-esteem and the love has to come back from the other person to you. So these are challenging prerequisites for any relationship. This is why there are lots of challenges in relationships if you experienced lots of trauma. Symptom number 7, you have trauma flashbacks, nightmares, and a lack of sleep. So unresolved trauma, primarily if it is centered around abuse, accidents, or crime, can also lead to flashbacks and nightmares, so that simply your body, mind, spirit system is living through these traumatic experiences again and again. Now, the related lack of sleep keeps you also in a state of avoidance and procrastination. So also here, the underlying fear comes to the surface and wants to keep your challenged system safe, and it wants to keep you in the current state. So you avoid to make a decision to get better, you avoid to change your current state, and you will continue to procrastinate because of that underlying fear that wants to keep you in that state. Symptom number 8, you consume drugs or you are overeating. As trauma leads to fear, it also leads to a lack of trust, to a lack of undeservedness, and also often to shame, self-blame, or guilt. So in those situations, it might happen that you consume pharmaceuticals, painkillers, anxiety, drugs, or alcohol simply to cover things up, to hide the pain of your trauma. So it's simply a hiding mechanism. Another symptom can be that you are overeating, especially if you experience a lot of emotional trauma, that then when you feel very emotional, that then the reaction is to hide this emotional pain with food. So that leads then to overeating. Symptom number 9, you have thoughts and beliefs of shame, guilt, and self-blame. Especially with abuse-related traumas that are created during your childhood, it happens very often that shame and guilt patterns were projected onto you. So, and if these shame and guilt patterns that go along with a trauma, probably the emotional or physical or even sexual abuse-based trauma, are not clear, the innate belief that you have inside of you of being a bad person, of being a worthless person, of being of no value, all of that remains until the trauma has been cleared. So if that's the case, you will see a lot of extensive self-blame and people who suffered from severe childhood trauma, and lots of unnecessary apologies as well. Symptom number 10, you have a hard time to focus, to concentrate, and have memory issues. So trauma can actually lead to a highly sensitive nervous system, and that makes it by design hard to focus and to concentrate because it's so highly sensitive. So trauma can then also impact different areas of the brain, such as the hippocampus, the amygdala, and prefrontal cortex. And while all these brain areas have different functions, they are all involved when it comes to the memory function. So they're all strongly associated with the memory function. So if they are basically damaged by severe trauma, then memory issues are a symptom and a consequence of that. Symptom number 11, you feel overly empathic. It might sound strange for you, but here's why this is a symptom of trauma. As I said, trauma can lead to a highly sensitive nervous system, which is attuned to threat. So now the outer symptom can often be of being an empath, while in reality, it's a trauma patient's patterned, highly sensitive nervous system that is reacting then in this empathic way. Yeah, so this symptom is really about being overly empathic. So we covered a lot. We covered all 11 symptoms of unresolved trauma. So here you find all of them on one page. Number 1, you are procrastinating and in a state of avoidance. Number 2, you are afraid of being judged and what others say or think about you. Number 3, you suffer from severe fear, anxiety, or depression. Number 4, you tend to emotional outbursts and mood swings. Number 5, you often feel offended by things other people say or do. Number 6, you are unable to form stable and close relationships. You run into the same relationship patterns over and over again. Number 7, you suffer from trauma flashbacks, nightmares, and a lack of sleep. Number 8, you're consuming drugs or you are overeating. Number 9, you have thoughts and beliefs of shame, guilt, and self-blame. Number 10, you have a hard time to focus, to concentrate, and you might have memory issues. And number 11, you are overly empathic. Now, how many trauma symptoms do you have? Do you want to keep your trauma, or do you want to get rid of your past traumas and get back into the driving seat of your life? And remember, you cannot talk away your trauma. So what does a trauma clearing do for you? A trauma clearing does a lot for you. In a nutshell, trauma clearing is the doorway for you to closing past painful experiences and stepping into your divinity so that you can follow your life's mission and achieve your desired outcomes. In detail, you'll become clear from all your past traumas, and this clearing is completed at the quantum level. Increase your energy frequency significantly so that you can attract different people, different events, different situations. You get a download from your higher self with new programs for your higher self. You can allow yourself to live from an open heart without fear. Imagine this. You can live from an open heart without fear. You will feel much lighter, and we will also clear the source of some physical problems. You will annihilate procrastination because this is actually a fear of taking action because of past trauma. You get clear of past issues as money, lack, and limitation, and you can allow your soul to close all chapters on past painful experiences, on past traumas. So you can allow yourself to focus on what you desire to create in your life. So you can allow yourself to focus on your life's mission and achieve your desired outcomes. Now, how is a trauma clearing different from other approaches? The difference is that I'm really focused on clearing the root causes for you. And that's the energetic trauma button, or the trauma buttons that sit at the cellular level and the DNA level, instead of treating the symptoms. So we are clearing the root causes, clearing the trauma buttons. We are not coping with the trauma. So that is the big difference. Because remember this, you cannot talk away a trauma because you cannot talk away an energetic button that sits at your DNA level. So these energetic blockages have to be cleared at the quantum level, and that's the difference. Here's a little bit more about myself. So my name is Tamara Schenk, and my focus here on the planet is to empowering human potential. I'm living in Germany with my husband Michael and my soul cats. And yes, I'm also doing this work for animals. So I've spent the last about 25 years in the corporate world. I was very technically oriented in the IT services industry. And I'm on a journey to really understand who I am and what I came here to do since more than the last 15 years. So all of this got started when I was in a severe health crisis and career crisis, and a lot of things were falling apart in front of me. And I learned a lot about myself on this journey. I could clear a lot of things. I learned rituals and then very, very effective techniques. And since I found my teacher, Toby Alexander, and learned all the clearing techniques that work at the quantum level, and also how to get to the soul insights to map all the things together. So this is when I learned about a system that really makes a huge tangible difference in people's lives, and it made a huge difference in my life first and foremost, which is why I'm so grateful that I can do this now for others and help you to do this. So I went through probably all of the 11 symptoms I just talked about. I had prenatal trauma, I had birth trauma, I suffered from a ton of childhood traumas, and that then translated into relationship trauma, in emotional mental abuse, and all these things. So I worked myself through all of these things, and thanks to my teacher and all the things I could learn, I could clear a lot of this for myself, and this really changed my life. So I had finally the courage to go out with this, to found Energy Field Mastery about 3 years ago, and to offer these services for my clients. And yeah, it started with auric clearing work, then we added the karma clearing work together. I added soul insights to it, and the more I learned about myself and the deeper I got to the root causes of my own challenges, I always figured out at the end of the day it is about past trauma. So this really became the core of my mission, and the core of what I really love to do, because it makes such a fundamental difference for your life. If you really make the decision, yes, I want to clear my past trauma, I want to live trauma-free and drama-free, because that goes hand in hand. So I'm happy to help you to clear your past trauma. So you learned a lot in this video, I hope so, and I also hope that you could diagnose yourself if you have maybe 4, 5, 6 or 7 or 8 of these symptoms of past trauma. If that's the case, get out of your fear and make a decision to change this now and to clear your past trauma. Send me a message at tamara@energywithmastery.com. We will have a chat about your situation. You let me know what you want to achieve, and I'm happy to tailor an approach for you together with you. There is also a bigger trauma program that covers all of this, and it comes with a lot of highly valuable bonuses. I'm happy to chat about that with you as well. So we will see what is the best solution for you. You can also find me on my website, energywithmastery.com, on my YouTube channel, and please feel free to also follow my Facebook page and my Twitter account. I hope to talk to you soon and to clear some past trauma from you. Thank you. See you.